well, tell me what sounds better. Give me 1 second. So you got this option, and you have my old 1980s dad headphones here.
I'm already a fan.
Going.
Good.
Yeah.
What? How do you pronounce your name? What should I pronounce your name? What should I call you?
If you're my mom, you say Wajahat. That might be too tough, so you can just call me Waj.
When I told my dad that we were going to be speaking with you, he said, Wajahat, you make sure that you pronounce his name correctly. He gave me the beta.
Yeah.
Make sure that you know the name right. He gave me the whole dad speech.
Nice. I like your dad already. He might be my favorite Hussein. So.
Oh God. Oh God. You just made my
I
day.
was wondering because I'm like, you spell, I'm assuming it's Asia, right? Asia Hussein. And
You said that so perfectly. Yes.
yeah, and I'm like, I've never seen AACIA. I'm like, that's a really unique name. And I'm like, wait, maybe it's Asia and she spells it AACIA. So is that right?
Yes.
Oh, look at that. And then all these foreign names of James and Bob. I'm like, this is these ethnic names.
Yeah, who are these people?
Why can't they have American names? Too
Right.
many vowels in a row.
86% vowels. So
Yeah, just
a
too
lot
much.
of vowels.
Calm down, guys.
It's too many vowels for me too. Yeah. Right.
People usually struggle with Bob Watch, so that happens all the time.
Yeah, Bob is also just too tough. No, I should pick your brain. I was just completely sidetracked, but I took one economics class at UC Berkeley and somehow I did really well. And it's one of those things where I felt like I wanted to go into it, and like I feel, I feel incompetent and deficient in my knowledge of the world every day. And I'm just like, it's like this weak spot. Like if I knew more about investing and trading and economics, I just feel like it's one of those things I am going to spend the next couple of years just learning more about it. So I'm always, the numbers just came out today. I'm sure you saw about the Fed. And so I go to my smart friends. I'm like, explain this to me like I'm a 6-year-old child. So in the WhatsApp thread, he's explained it to me. So I'm glad to be connected with you guys so I can shamelessly follow you and try to absorb your brain and understand numbers and markets.
Wow.
Well, I will tell you this real quickly is that I want you to say that again in a half hour, that you're glad to be with me, because I will tell you this. I think differently than you in a lot of things. I've seen a lot of your stuff on Twitter, but I want to know why you think what you do.
Sure.
And I want to be able to discuss it without wanting to strangle each other. So hopefully, I'll never want to strangle you. I hope I can do the same. So that's where I'm at.
I'm not a strangler.
Oh, good. I'm not anymore.
In Jimmy's language, that means that he likes you, enjoys you, and respects you.
Even though he might
translation.
occasionally strangle me, but that's pretty much most people who know me, so that's fine.
No, I like to learn. I like to learn and talk about different things. And my focus is mostly macroeconomic, and that's why I lean as politically that I do. And socially, I think we're probably going to agree on most everything.
Well, we'll get to that. The first thing, obviously, that I want to point out and talk about is, your book drop.
Sure.
January 26th is the date, right?
25th.
Okay. And go back to where you came from and other helpful recommendations on how to become American, which is obviously witty and clever. And the way that it comes across is I am picking fun at the ridiculousness of having to explain that I'm American, but it sounds kind. It doesn't sound menacing.
Yeah, that's the title of the book reflects both the tone of the book and also the type of schizophrenic reality for so many of us, where you're citizens, but overnight you become a suspect. You're both us and you're them. You're simultaneously told every day to go back to where you come from. And then there's a self-help book about how you too can be American. So I just thought by doing it with that type of Trojan horse and tongue-in-cheek type of humor and satire, you can have some biting wit, some political analysis, reflect some of the absurdity of this hate that unfortunately, people think, oh, you Muslims and darkies are talking about it. If you're a student of American history, the Iachino was not considered an American name in the 1920s, right? So this story, people forget that. Like, and you sometimes have to connect the dots. You're like, Irish Catholics, if you were to tell people in 2021, if you were to tell people in 1955 that of the 9th Supreme Court justices, a majority would be Catholic, they'd say, get the F out. That's a hilarious joke. So that's like, it's trying to connect those dots. And sometimes you see that people who otherwise, we get so bombarded with so much information, myself included, that you sometimes have to step back, and through humor, it allows the medicine to go down easier and makes people more receptive to otherwise hostile ideas about politics and religion that they might otherwise not entertain. You don't have to agree with everything, but it becomes like, I went to an all-boy Jesuit Catholic high school. I didn't agree with everything. I appreciated the education. I love the values. I'm grateful I went there. So it's one of those situations, right? Like, you don't have to agree with me, but maybe you can appreciate my perspective and where I'm coming from.
Exactly. And that's where the teaching comes in. I look at you as a teacher because you are embracing hostility and, hostile nuances that you and I and, Iachino 50 years ago and Urios had to deal with. And you do it with kindness.
Well, I try. I try to be kind. Social media flattens people. Unfortunately, I was having a conversation with my old professor, James McWhirter, who's now a New York Times columnist. So he wrote a book which I disagree with, like woke racism. So we were having a debate in New York like a couple of days ago, Penn America, and I know the guy. And so if what social media unfortunately has done, and I'm not talking about right or left, I'm just talking about people. It's flattened people. And so it flattens you completely. It takes away all the complexities, and what you become is you become an essentialized version of your last take. So James might not be like this complex, interesting guy who I might enjoy talking to. He might do it. I'm just throwing this out there. I don't know. He might do a take which I completely disagree with, and James becomes that take, and then I become his nemesis, and then we have to fight each other. Whereas in real life, just with my personal background, with the diversity that I grew up in the Bay Area, went to all-boy Jesuit Catholic high school, oftentimes a token Muslim, traveled around the world. In your own family, you don't really punch someone if they disagree with you. You're like, oh, that's my nutty conservative uncle. He's a lovable guy, though. I'm just trying to educate him on some issues with race and immigration. You know what I'm saying? That's how most people are. I don't want to romanticize or downplay the very real threats that we're living with right now, and how I believe so many otherwise well-intentioned Americans are radicalized. But even when I've spoken to those folks, right, in traveling, I went to the Rust Belt after 2016 election. I told my speaking agency, send me to the Rust Belt. There's no point in me going to New York. Just send me to Ohio and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. And I talked to all those folks and had a 2-hour car ride with a hardcore Trump voter who drove me to the airport. He's a retired guy. He drove me from the college.
Were you in the car by yourself with him?
Yeah. No punches. No one exchanged swear words.
Not even one punch.
Not even one punch. I'm like, just tell me, like, why'd you vote for Trump? He told me. I'm like, interesting. He said, why'd you vote for Clinton? I'm like, okay. I disagree with him, but it was it was really interesting. And he had a very telling comment. He says, I don't know about you, but in my Facebook feed, what I've gone for the past 2 weeks is that Clinton's taking my guns. I'm assuming based on algorithms, you did not get that. I'm like, nope, not a single post. So it also kind of unfortunately shows us how the current landscape puts us in isolated cocoons, which are very dangerous.
Yeah.
That's why having these tough conversations, or even stepping on toes, or looking at someone in the face, I really believe that most of us, including myself, probably would not say or tweet what we tweet if I had to look at you in the face. I'd probably say the same thing, but in a much more, I don't know, decent, humane way.
That's the flattening that you're talking about. That makes sense.
Because I can't look James in the eye. And I made James into my nemesis for no reason, just for fun. But
very common.
But James,
you were gonna anyway. You just jumped the gun. Yeah,
might as well.
Quickly.
I'll make Bob the nice one. I'll make Bob the nice white guy. I'll make James the evil white guy. Just for why not? Let's just.
Are you a psychologist?
Cable news split screen. But that's what I think. That's the problem that all of us are facing with, is that we reduce the complexities. And so I'm sorry for this TED talk, but I'll be finished. The book tries to put in some of those nuances that get flattened. And as speaking, especially as a Muslim, as a child of immigrants, when you're called, go back to where you come from, enemy of the people, Islam hates us. Well, what do you really mean? And then when you investigate that, when someone says that, you're like, yo, I'm your friend, I'm Muslim. He goes, oh, Waj, I'm not talking about you.
Oh, right. You're okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you're Pakistani? I couldn't even tell.
Yeah. There you go. So that's what happens. I thought you were Indian. I love Indian food. Yeah.
I love Indian food. I've had chicken marsala from Trader Joe's.
I had naan bread, which means bread, but that's right. Fine. So yeah. Anyway, so I don't know if we were recording, but that was my spiel. Thank you.
I am recording. Okay.
Oh, good.
But if I could, first of all, is it okay to address the book? It's okay to address the book in this, right? So I got it right here.
Yeah,
I'm glad you guys got a copy. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So I want to go back to a couple of things you said, if I could. First of all, Iachino, it's actually Iachino. You were closer to correct pronunciation than most people.
Iachino. Okay.
Yeah. Giacchino is actually still not considered an American name in many circles. You said 50 years ago, Ossie repeated that. And actually, Ossie and I have talked about this. But I have a quick story, if you have time for it, that actually involves Jim. It actually involves Jim. We did content for the same company, and there was a couple of other people in our sort of circle that did content there as well. And I was doing a piece of content with an Irish-American guy that we both know and love. And I'll just leave his name off. He's a friend of both mine and Jim's. And I walked in and he was already there. And there was another person there of French descent and a person of Armenian descent and a person of German descent in the room when I walked in. And the Irish gentleman turned to me and said, Bobby Iacchino, we were just talking. Who do you think's more Italian, you or Jim Iurio? I said, well, first of all, I speak the language, so it's probably me. I said, second of all, it's Iurio, and I don't think he says that, so it's probably me. And third of all, if I were Black, would it have been okay to say that to me? And the Armenian person came running over and said, I'm so sorry. And I go, I'm actually not offended by this. I said, I say this because sometimes I think the differences in skin color overlook the differences in culture. And the reason I say two things that you brought up, because I'm in the same boat as you in a lot of cases. In your book, you said you used to check other. I check other now.
Do you?
Not because there's any shame in being considered white by Black and brown people, or any shame of being considered not quite white by a lot of white people, German, Irish descent, the people who are legacy prior to the Italian wave. And actually, my parents, both immigrants. I spoke Italian before I spoke English, and they both came here in the last wave of Italians in the early 60s. So I experienced a lot of that immigrant thing where I went to grade school with an accent and sandwiches made on funny looking bread. Right.
Oh, so basically you're my Italian brother from another mother, basically.
Except I do punch. I do. So there's one of the differences.
And you have muscles.
Right.
And you have muscles and tattoos.
Because you spoke Urdu first, right?
Yeah, well, just like, I was just listening to Bob's story. It's so remarkable. The reason why I said he's like my Italian brother from another mother is my first language was Urdu, even though I was born and raised in this country in the Bay Area, California. I had, forget accent, I couldn't speak English. I knew 3 phrases of English when I went to preschool. Shut up, idiot, and uh-oh, pasgerio. Because that's what my mom used to say. Shut up, idiot, and uh-oh, spaghetti was a Campbell soup commercial. I couldn't pronounce it. I used to say uh-oh, pasgerio. And my
parents
one of
my favorite parts of your book.
Yeah, it's in the book. My parents being old school, blunt immigrants were like, hey, you'll learn. And so they just dropped me off at Child's Hideaway Preschool, brown Muslim kid, fat kid, awkward, shy kid with an accent who couldn't speak English. And they're like, hey, you'll learn. And which I did. I had to take ESL. So like Bob, I had the accent, had the funny last name or first name. And then, as I mentioned in the book, I think it's school where we first learn our place in the American hierarchy. That's where you first learn you're an other. Because I'm sure, Bob, in your home, you're like, everyone speaks Italian.
Well, it's funny you say that because you had The Godfather in chapter 7. Like I got to chapter 7 and unfortunately I didn't get much past that.
Hey, as long as I got you to chapter 7, that's fine.
Right. And by the way, the Sicilian they spoke was perfect. And if you have to look at the subtitles, completely incorrect. They put in the wrong subtitles. They get the meaning across, but it wasn't literal. There was a lot of the subtitles that were incorrect and they made my father angry. They didn't make me angry because I love the movie as well. But when I got to the Godfather part of this, I'm like, okay, it's going to be very easy to sort of connect on the view that I understand other. And so it's a weird place to be an Italian immigrant and even second or third generation like Jimmy, because there's a lot of people that look at you as Italian first. And when I do TV and when Jimmy does TV, because I've heard people say it about Jimmy, you don't speak like an Italian at all. I get that all the time.
Wow.
Now, if you give me a glass of wine and you get me riled up, you'll hear the do's, D's, and the trees and fours and all that stuff. You'll hear that.
You're pretty whitewashed. You still don't. I've heard you on wine.
Me, nobody ever says I don't look Italian. I think I look Swedish. I don't see it.
Honestly, we love you, but you are a kind of an anomaly, like Waj is. Okay, I have a point. You are finance bro, but you're also gym bro, you're tattoo sleeve guy. You're all of these things. And
hey, he's an IROC Z guy. That's what he's driving.
I had two of them.
Right. That's what we're talking about here.
I had a black one and an electric blue one. So I had two growing up.
You're recovering.
I'm recovered.
But,
I'm
you
also
know,
a recovered
I think you
Catholic,
make a
the way I
good
look
point.
at it.
And James, of course, I want to, you know, you got to jump in here. I don't want to hog the
No, it's
spotlight,
fine.
but like Bob said something
We want you
important.
to hug.
No. But Bob said something important. I'm so glad you did. And I'm so glad you share your personal story because many Americans forget. Let's just focus on Italians for a second. You know, the 1920s, the Italians were the invaders. You know, right now it's the Mexicans and the undocumented and the Muslims. In the 20s, it was the Italians. Demonized a criminal element. They'll never assimilate. They'll never integrate. They're like genetically predisposed towards villainy, anti-democratic. There's too many of them. And so when we had this 1924 Immigration Act, which restricted immigration, it was predominantly to keep away, of course, all Asians, Black and brown folks, but also, people forget this, specifically wanted to keep out Italians and Eastern European Jews, Italians in particular. And I feel like that type of demonization of Italians as they went towards whiteness, many of the younger folks sometimes forget, but that's why I think Bob and James' story is important. That like, yo, we've gone through this. We're still going through it.
So here's my question then to you. Okay, so my experience is a lot different. And I grew up in the suburbs, but it was a heavy mob. And, you know, I was born in 1965 in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. I now currently own a bar that used to be owned by the Capone gang. There was a lot of gangsters out there.
Whoa.
And I went to a school where we were kind of viewed as the dirty Dagos because I did live in a block that was a lot of Italian immigrant families. And the patriarch was my grandfather. But my question is this, is there any element? So sometimes when I talk to friends who are African-American and we start sharing stories, there's this kind of edge that they have, like, don't compare anything you got with what I got. It seems like you don't have that. It seems like you are welcoming other people's stories and it's not sort of graded on a curve. Do you think when you hear other people say that, like, don't compare your stuff with mine, it's way different, does that irritate you?
No, I'll tell you. So this is where I feel like it's a divide and conquer tactic, where oftentimes it's the minority suffering contest, where a lot of folks, you know, everyone's entitled to their own rage and their own story and their opinion. And the Italian story is different from the Muslim story, different from the African American story. So we have to respect our unique heritage and our pathway, you know, in this country towards hopefully becoming American or being seen as American. At the same time, I see so many parallels. And what I try to do is I'm like, listen, yes, everyone has their distinct, unique story and narrative, but there are parallels in this American journey. There are parallels, and it's better for us to see the commonality so we can unite. And I feel like sometimes where people say, when we engage in this type of minority suffering contest or the pissing contest, instead of seeing the overwhelming commonalities and threads, just like Bob shared his story right at the top of the gate. We'd never talked before. We had no notes before this, you know, podcast.
Sort of talk.
Yeah, but he read the book, right? And he himself is like, oh, snap. It's something that makes people think, huh, well, if this happened against my grandparents, wasn't it an injustice? Didn't it make life harder? What did my grandparents and parents have to go through? Why should anyone else have to go through that? Why should my kids have to go through that? We have to do better. And I think what you're saying is the minority suffering contest, I try to always nip it in the bud. As soon as I hear it, I'm like, I understand. I'm not comparing our suffering to your suffering. The anti-Black racism in this country is deep-seated. You know, my ancestors were not enslaved. We were not subject to lynching. Yes, the indigenous Americans in this country were massacred. So absolutely, you guys have that unique, enduring trauma and racism. But there are similarities here where the anti-Black racism inspired a xenophobia that you can trace to Chinese Exclusion Act, internment of Japanese Americans, bigotry against Italians, against Mexican laborers, and the war on terror and Muslims. And that's where I think you give people the space to have their unique narrative, but also you create this multicultural coalition that says, you know what, I might differ with you on economics, on national security, on immigration, but I agree with you as an American. Your child has a right to live with dignity and security and has the right to dream of becoming president regardless of their gender or their ethnicity. That's right. Where I'm trying to get at.
Yes. One of the most fascinating things that you just said is I try to nip it in the bud. The argument, the pissing contest of, you know, who's had the most suffrage, you know, in terms of their categorization of minority. But it sounds like, Waj, you have somehow successfully already made you're already the bigger person.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's the bigger person, right? Because you have to, you know, maybe if I were as younger, I'd be
you've accepted that people are not because okay, what I'm hearing from you, you're an anomaly, right? I mean, you're kind, you're funny,
Maybe
you're
debatable.
there. You go.
Which part?
Yeah, both. But you know what? My thing is this. I think as I've gone older and as I've been exposed to more people, let me put it this way. In America, right, no one's racist. No one's racist. I've never met someone who's ever claimed they're racist. No one has a racist bone in their body. People who voted for Trump aren't racist. People who say racist things aren't racist. Like, we would much rather get punched in the face or have you kick our dog in the chin than call us racist. We get reactive, we get defensive, right? It happens to all of us, and people shut down. And we can't have those conversations. And I feel like it's one of those situations where I'm the same way too. When someone said that to me, I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And then you like list your own life and your all the tragedies in your life and your
all the
parents, right?
tragedy.
Yeah. And then you get into the suffering contest. And but then I also have to realize, being exposed to so many people are coming from a place of trauma. People are coming from a place of being exposed to daily enduring trauma. So it's also a matter of pausing and saying, okay, why is this person reacting the way they're reacting? And then you listen to them. And then you say, I hear you. That was not my intention. You're right that you are undergoing the type of trauma, especially Black folks, that none of us have. But I am an ally. I'm trying to be an ally. I'm trying to see the commonalities and threads. It's not a competition. And that's where it requires a little bit of, let me put it this way, allowing discomfort, allowing yourself to get poked. And instead of reacting the way we all react, just take a step back and see, okay, why is this person responding this way? And then let me see if I can try to engage them with some empathy. And then usually what I see is that same person was so pissed off if you say the wrong pronoun, if you say the wrong word, right? Like, it happens, right? Like, even with my best intentions, I accidentally said the wrong pronoun, and the person reacts, and I'm like, listen, I'm learning, I'm trying. And the person then goes, okay, thank you for trying, I get it.
Right.
And I try to put the same way that there.
But if you automatically snare and jump back and get defensive, then it's like
it's human nature. It's human nature.
Human nature, exactly. We're
no, but if after you apologize,
we're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
But here's my question, and this is something that I've thought about a lot. I try to say the right things to people, and I'm exposed to people differently. But if I apologize after I call them the wrong thing, and then they're still angry, then they're just a dick, and I don't want to then acquiesce. Does that make me a bad person?
No, see, that is a human nature situation. Let me put it this way. I've thought about this a lot, because the reality is most of us behave that way, if we were to be honest with ourselves. But then you have to ask yourself, well, what is this person going through? And maybe I might not win over this one particular person. But instead of doubling down and having this knee-jerk reaction, it's an opportunity for me to be better next time, right? Like, sometimes you're like, should I do the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing? Should I do the right thing just because? Or it's like the mindset of many Americans. Well, F you. I'm going to be politically incorrect, shoot from the hip, and say what I want to say. Go F yourself.
No, that's not what I said, though. I'm not saying. I'm saying this. An apology.
This
if
is
you're
what
going to try to make me a better person here, I'm going to just hang up right away.
No, right? No. What I'm saying is, not you, James, but many people, right? That's their default. Well, I tried.
Yeah. Universally.
Yeah. Well, I tried, and they didn't want my peace offering, so F them. I'm going to break the olive branch. And I feel like you have to then compare for a second and just be like, imagine if you're in that, like, suppose Bob was in that situation, right? Just flip it. And, someone said that to him, and he's had a bad day, and he's had it for the last 2 weeks. You'd probably appreciate, and like I've appreciated the person who, in the moment, I might get pissed off and say, man, you asked just a bad faith question about Muslims, and you repeat it 2-3 times, even though I explained it to you. But then if that person comes back to me once or twice, then I go, you know what? I appreciate you coming back. I appreciate you staying in the ring. I appreciate you extending the conversation. I apologize for having that snap judgment. So it requires us who are in a place of some privilege to maybe just have a bigger heart. And like a parent to a kid, I'm not trying to infantilize, like your kids, I have 3 kids, all right? They might like get pissed off and say something that I'm like, you know what? Look at my position of power here, right? let me be the better person, and let me re-engage. And then usually the kid comes back. And I'm not saying the person of color is a kid. I'm not infantilizing myself. I'm just giving an analogy as a parent. Sometimes these situations, James, I appreciate you talking about it, because it's a very real human emotion and response. I tried my best. I have good intentions, and you still see me as an asshole. Go F yourself. Whereas I feel like, you know what? I see where you're coming from. I think that was an unfair hit. This was my intention. This is what I say in the book also. You're only responsible for your own intention and actions. and you put that out in the universe. And if the person doesn't respond, you say, you know what, I'm doing this for myself and for God and for my ethics, peace. But I've seen in the long run, especially in the workplace environment, you'll get like the employer trying to do his best and the employees are still pissed off. But what I've seen is in the long run, that same employee says, I really appreciate James at least trying. Like a year, fast forward a year, 2 years, we're playing a long-term game here. So that's my response to your very real human emotional response to these daily type of conversations that take place every day. And instead of being an opening, people shut down.
Yes. It sounds like you've had them frequently too.
I've been in this space. I've been in this space for like, my whole life. Like Bob, I've been, like I say in the book, right? People think it's the post 9/11 climate. Like I call myself the Muslim fireman, the Muslim Wikipedia. After 9/11, you have to be the token expert on all things Muslimy, like 1400 years of civilization.
Muslimy.
Yeah, anything Muslimy. Like
I'm just gonna enjoy that.
Yeah, it's Islam, Quran, Sharia, like Hamas, hummus, everything. You have to know everything. And you're like, you have to be the moderate Muslim and you have to defend your people. And if you make a mistake, all Muslims are bad, just like in the 20s and 30s. If that one Italian isn't moderate enough, see, we knew it. He was just faking it. He's just the outlier. All them sneaky Italians. That's how it was.
We're not white enough. We're not brown enough.
Yeah, you're not brown enough. You're not like, you always have to be perfect. And then you get the shit from your own community. Right? It's never enough. So you sit there and you go, why am I a masochist? Why the F am I doing this? I should have just gone into corporate law. But then you think, I got 3 kids and they deserve a better America. And I also think, from James's perspective, when I'm the guy who, with the best of intentions, who says the wrong thing, I flip it and I go, this has happened to me before, where someone says this and I see how hurtful it is and I snap. Well, maybe, I have to give this person...
snap in anger?
Well, they just snap, they snap, or they don't, it's not in anger, but you just snap. You're like, God damn ignorance, Jesus Christ, I can't believe this is happening. But then you think, where is this person coming from? And the reason why I decide to do it, like a lot of my friends say the following, and everyone's responsible for themselves. Everyone has a different strategy and emotional bandwidth. Some people say, I'm tired, I can't do this shit. Fine. But for the rest of us who have enough bandwidth, what I say is this person who is exposing themselves to this uncomfortable conversation, willing to expose their ignorance and talk to me about Muslimy things and un-PC things, I might be the only lifeline they have to this conversation. And so maybe if I, even though it's freaking exhausting,
automatic burden.
Yeah, a burden and humiliating, but if I can be the better person and spend 5 minutes talking this through, maybe, just maybe, I can lay a seed in this person's mind that might make them think a little bit differently. And I know, Bob, growing up, I was a token Muslim. I'm assuming you were the token Italian kid. Fast forward 20 years, 25 years, during the Trump administration, a lot of my friends who were white friends, white Catholic friends, were like, yo, I just want to say that all this BS against Muslims, I don't buy it because I know you. So that long-term return on investment paid out, if you will.
But that's super interesting to me. And actually, I want to sincerely and genuinely ask for your advice, because I think you're the right person to ask in becoming a better person. You mentioned the sort of who's the bigger victim. And I almost haven't listened to a lot of this because that is ruminating in my head. I have a really close friend, and I'm going to be the guy who says one of my best friends is black, but he's an African-American, and he and I would hang out and we would drink too much and we would have these conversations all the time. And it was during the period of time, and I'm sorry if I talk in stories a lot, but I feel like bringing the actual event forward, it makes it's clearer to me to ask you the right question. We had a conversation one time about Doc Rivers and the way he was on TV, clearly very emotional about having to have a conversation with his son about how to deal with the police, right? And this friend of mine had actually completely changed my mind on cultural appropriation. I was never someone who believed that existed. And his way of explaining it to me was, you can go back to Italy. I don't have somewhere to go back to except Detroit, right? Detroit, where it's our music and it's our food and this and that. And he goes, and that's why, he goes, I feel my people are so sensitive about it. And that struck me as a very reasonable thing to think. Yes, I can go back to Italy. I do go back to Italy, although one of the best Italian restaurants is owned by an Eastern European Jew. But I do love the restaurant. It's confusing to me. But we were having a conversation about Doc Rivers And he said to me, Bobby, you don't understand. You don't have to talk to your kids about how to talk to the police. You've never had to experience that. And I said, but my father had that conversation with me because in the 70s, he got the shit kicked out of him by the Cicero police because he was driving a car similar to a Chicago outfit work car that they were looking for. And when they pulled him over, he couldn't speak English. So they beat the hell out of him until they got the call over the radio that that's not it. And then they left. And nothing ever happened. And obviously, a lot of things went on, not just with Italians that never got reported back in the 70s. But this particular incident made my dad sit me down and say yes, sir. Say no, sir. Keep your hands on the wheel. If they tell you to get out, get out. If they want to look in the trunk, let them look in the trunk. And as soon as you can, call me. And he had that and when I explained this to my friend, he had the same sort of kind of nodding his head moment that I had when he explained his understanding of cultural appropriation. But the reason that I do this, who's the bigger victim, is I feel like being viewed as a white person by the majority of, can we say biopic, by the majority of the Black, brown, indigenous community, puts me in a situation where they group me. They think that I don't understand some of what they've gone through. And if I try to explain it to them, you're white, you don't know. Just because I've reached a level of success at this point. And it does make me angry, Watch. It really does.
That you're accused of not knowing?
What's that?
That you're accused, it makes you angry that you're accused.
The idea that they think somehow because I'm successful now, it has something to do with my I tan really easy whiteness, right? I mean, whereas in Italy, Southern Italians are looked down upon because they're darker. Same thing in Pakistan. You just have to let people have their anger. What's that?
I mean, the thing is, this is then we have to.
I want advice on how to deal with that. Is what I'm asking.
Well, you know, I mean, I think the situation is, it goes back to the previous conversation when people snap and we take it so personally. I think it's very hard to depersonalize yourself from a conversation when you are being personally attacked. You know, it's like the decoupling. So it's not about Bob Iacchino. It's about Bob who is able to mainstream into whiteness or pass. And it's not about Bob as a white person, even though he doesn't maybe refer, categorize himself as a white person. It's about whiteness in this country. And specifically, let me put it this way. Whiteness as an ideology, a paradigm, a system that has elevated those who get to be included in whiteness at the expense of Black and brown folks and Asian Americans, right? The systems that benefit white skin and that specific complexion. So I think, and this is tough because it's not a personal attack. It's rather an attack on a system, but a person feels it personally, right? Yes. And so how do you decouple that? And so, like, I always tell folks this is, you know, you might think I get this every day. You hate white people. I'm like, no, I actually do not hate white people. Growing up, we didn't want to replace white folks. We wanted to get an invite to the barbecue. I wanted to eat meatloaf. I wanted to go to a white person's home and wear shoes in the home. I wanted to see if they actually talk back to their parents. Talk to like most ethnic kids and BIPOC kids. We're like, we didn't want to replace white folks. We just wanted an invite to the party. We wanted Susie, the cheerleader, to smile at us, and we had Chad and Travis to invite us to eat meatloaf. That's all we wanted, right? But,
Chad, did you just say Chad and Travis?
Trent, whatever his name is.
I'm offended by those names.
Brock.
Tyler. Right.
Brock. Chad is not an Italian name. Brock is neither an Italian name either. So it's one of those situations where it's a realization that it's not white people, but it's whiteness. It's a system, right? And then I'm going to blow your head with this also. There are white people who are actually against whiteness, and there are people of color who endorse it. That's how complex this is, right? So there are white people who say, I don't hate myself. Yes, I'm white. I'm categorized as white, but I reject the concept of whiteness as it has been constructed in America. I'm trying to reform it and make it better. I understand there are privileges that I get due to the complexion of my skin that unfortunately Black and brown folks don't. And I do think there was something with the George Floyd murder, in the video of the murder and the Ahmaud Arbery lynching, that I think, Bob, that story, that narrative, that image really woke up a lot of people to say, wow, these Black folks aren't just complaining. This is not just playing the race card. Wow. And even though you have the wisdom and the insight of the story that Black parents and brown parents tell their kids, I know for a fact, a lot of folks who consider themselves white, it was an eye-opening experience. They're like, we call the police to protect and serve. You mean you're teaching your kid at the age of 14? Wow, that's not right. You see what I'm saying? So that's my quick answer is, it's very hard not to take it personally. I'm a human being. Let's just talk as people.
Yes.
But you have to try to depersonalize it and see that this person who is saying this, usually a black person, brown person, or a person who has not passed into whiteness, is reflecting their experiences of being an American in a country that promises equality, but gives you inequality based on the color of your skin. That's what I'm trying to say.
I know I'm dominating this right now, and I'll stop after this. But the thing that I would say is, you being
I'm
a
just thinking about the
journalist,
sound bites.
you being a journalist and being obviously, I mean, I'm loving your book, even though I disagree with some of it. I agree with quite a bit of it, actually.
That's awesome. I want you to disagree and agree.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's really a must read for people if you actually want to think. The question I would ask you is there a better word than whiteness? Because if there's white people that reject whiteness, and there's people of color that embrace whiteness, and we would agree that in other nations, the pigment has been a problem. It's not just in the US, right? It's, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Southern Pakistan is looked down upon from Northern Pakistan. That's the case in Italy for sure. The Southern Italians are considered essentially the hillbillies, similar to the people in West Virginia that would be looked down upon, even though they're white, because they're just hillbillies. They're stupid mountain people. That's what my people were considered in Italy. And I can't buy into it's about skin color, because my skin color 50 years ago would have been too dark, or my nose would have been too big, or I was too short, or I smelled like garlic, or whatever it was. It's always something. And when you classify it as whiteness, it can't go away. To me, it's like the word does damage to what you're trying to achieve.
You have to, because two things. You have to name something for what it is. And the reality is in America, the term white did not exist until the late 17th or so century, when it was created by the slave owners and landowners and colonists to ascribe to themselves a superiority compared to, wait for it, black folks, indigenous folks, right? Sure. You can't even see the records of white. It was an invented word. It's a social construct. And so this social construct, which was a power construct for landowners in power, and to differentiate themselves from the lower species, which are black folks and indigenous folks. Now, you say something also very interesting here.
All right, I'm so sorry. This is my awkward moment. We're about to turn into a pumpkin.